Why did God not have to give those details to Solomon the same way that he did to Moses and his team? One word. Anyone want to guess? We've mentioned it already. Anyone? Huh? The what? Heart? You're very, very close. The heart is the reason he could do this. That's why God was able to do it. But I'm looking for one word. It comes from the video clip that we saw. Freedom. God gave Solomon a freedom that Moses and the children of Israel did not have. Granted, the children of Israel did have a physical freedom. They had just been delivered out of slavery. But God gave Solomon a freedom unlike anything that we had seen before. That's the key. That's the word that we need to talk about. It's freedom. There's a lot to say about freedom. We are only going to scratch the surface on it this morning. But our Brit Hadashah portion talks about it, doesn't use the word. Remember our Brit Hadashah portion, the portion from the New Testament? It's about giving, right? Where do you see freedom in this passage? Hey, Dan, can we pull that passage back up on the screen? The New Testament. 2 Corinthians 9. This is the first slide here. Where do you see freedom in this passage? But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity. Are you saying that's where it is?
Yeah, it's liberality.
So each one gives as he purposes. Yeah. That's freedom. That's freedom. If it wasn't, God would have said, or in this case, God through Paul would have said, all right, y'all committed to, 17,000 shekels. Each one of you has to give, 14.5 shekels, by temple. He would have said, he would have been very, very specific. But he doesn't, because of freedom. People are free to give or not give as they have purposed in their hearts. That's freedom. But is there an expectation? Is there an expectation? You're free to do what you want to do. All right, look. Let me put it this way. Each and every one of you are free to do whatever you want Saturday morning, 10:30 to 12:30. Is there an expectation? Sure. I expect that on Saturday mornings from 10:30 to 12:30, I'm going to see you here. That's the expectation. But you're free to do whatever you want to. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just an expectation. That Brit Hadashah portion talks about freedom, doesn't use the word. Again, this portion almost always used to teach the principles about giving money. And I really don't like to preach that message, especially when the congregation is in a financial need. Although, not coincidentally, that's always when it's warranted the most. Okay? However, the principle of freedom is in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7. The English translation of the verse, each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. The freedom is that whatever is in your heart, do. Does that just apply to money? Nope. Nope, doesn't. Hey, it could apply to building a temple, if you were so inclined. Whatever is in your heart, do. That doesn't mean that everything in your heart is good. But if you have placed your trust and faith in Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ, God has given you a new heart. And that new heart, the heart of flesh rather than the heart of stone, should be an all good heart. Now there's still the flesh, but our desire in our heart should be to please God. That's why I could say that what Bob was talking about and what Gina Ten was talking about Solomon's heart is part and parcel of this conversation, because it was because of Solomon's heart that God felt free to give him the freedom that he did. Solomon was given a listening heart, a hearing heart. At this point in his career, and we know that it didn't stay this way. Okay? He ended up with some 900 plus concubines. Okay? He was deposed, eventually because of his walking away from the Lord. But at this point in his career, which is very early on in his career, think about this. We're talking about 1 Kings chapter 6 is the building of the temple. Okay? Solomon takes rule in 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 4, he is following up on all the executions that his father told him to do. And the very next thing we see is this listening heart and the judgment between the two women and the cutting the baby in half thing. And then in chapter 5, we start to see him making plans to build the temple. So this is very early on. He hasn't had the time to go down that road yet. His heart is still where it needs to be. Okay? At this point in his career, he is sold out to the Lord. He is sold out to the Lord. He wants to do what is pleasing to the Lord. He very definitely wants to do in his heart what is pleasing to the Lord. And therefore, because of that heartful willingness, he is given the freedom to do what he wants to do. Because God knows that Solomon's heart is directed towards him. God blessed it, bottom line. He didn't give the specifications, but he blessed it. We had a really interesting conversation about this at the men's meeting. How do we know God blessed it? How do we know that God blessed the temple? Even though he did not give the specifications and all the details for the temple, the building of the temple, how do we know that he blessed it? He lived there. He lived there. His presence dwelt there for a long, long time. Okay? But even in the freedom that God gave to Solomon, there were some qualifications to that. Okay? And this is why I told you, don't get too far ahead of me. In 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 12. 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 12. God speaks directly to Solomon about the temple. He doesn't say, I think it really could have been bigger. He doesn't say, I think the courtyard should have been on the north side. No, he doesn't mention anything about the specifications, about the details. This would have been the place to do it. Hey, that outer courtyard, that second level staircase that should have had one more step. That would have been the kind of place right now that God should have done that. But he doesn't. What he says is this. He says, if you walk in my statutes and execute my ordinances and keep all my commandments by walking in them, then I will carry out my word with you which I spoke to David your father. And I will dwell among the sons of Israel and will not forsake my people Israel. Okay? We need to understand this. Does this have anything to do with the building of the temple or the freedom that God had given him to do it? It does not. What God says here in this passage has absolutely nothing to do with the building of the temple or the freedom that God had given to do it. He had already done it. Remember, this is already starting through the process. We've already read how he's crafting this thing. It's already in the process of being built. It had nothing to do with whether or not Solomon was going to build the temple. That's not the